Cincinnati Reds are rumored to trade Hunter Greene. Is this real? Why the Red Sox could be a good fit if that ends up happening.
You are Locked On MLB Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're crossing over here. Locked On Reds, Locked On Red Sox, Gabby Maljanian, Jeff Carr. We are here talking Reds and Red Sox. And actually, it's kind of fun because this is the opening day matchup. So a little bit later on in the show, we're going to give you some really ridiculously early and bold predictions that will probably be completely untrue. But we're going to get into that later on in today's podcast. Here in just a few minutes, we'll talk about why the Red Sox make a lot of sense to be a trade partner for the Reds. And we will begin with the fact that Hunter Greene is being rumored to be available. And why, I'm not necessarily sure that that's going to happen, but I do think that there is a good pitcher who could be on the move. That's all in today's Locked On MLB crossover that is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And Gabby, I know that I've seen some episodes across the Locked On MLB sphere about this rumor that Hunter Greene could be available. And there's definitely some reasons why I think it's logical, but I don't think he's going to be the guy that ends up moving. But your first thoughts when you saw, you're like, what? This guy's pretty good. He could be available.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised because I was like, why would the Reds move somebody like that? But at the same time, I was like, wow, this would be a great fit for the Boston Red Sox because they desperately need a number 2 starting pitcher to put in that rotation behind Garrett Crochet, because you had Crochet, who was fantastic in 2025, and then you kind of just had everybody else. So there wasn't really a number 2 starter there. They had 2 pitchers who pitched to the level of, I would say, a number 3 starter, but they really didn't have that confident number 2. So if they were to bring in Hunter Greene and make something like that happen, that would be a great 1-2 punch of Crochet and Hunter Greene, and it almost makes too much sense for the Red Sox not to at least try to make a move for him.
I mean, you're talking about a guy in Hunter Greene who last year was 3rd on the team or on the Reds in WAR. He had 4.4 wins above replacement last season, and he did that in 19 starts because he dealt with some injury issues. He had a long period of time where he dealt with what was reported as a grade 1 groin strain, but it just never seemed to go away. He never could seem to get comfortable for a long period of time on the mound, and so it took him a while to get back from that. But when he was healthy, he was absolutely lights out. That's going to be the interesting thing for me because, okay, on one hand, you can lay out some logic and say this is why this rumor makes sense. Number one, he's going to be one of the highest paid guys on the team. And we all know that there is a money game, a spreadsheet that the Reds play with. And it's not necessarily the spreadsheet other teams play with. They tend to cap themselves a lot lower than the likes of the Red Sox or a lot of different teams out there. So with that, you as the president of baseball operations, Nick Krall, is playing a little bit more of a money game than he is a roster game, but he tries to marry that with talent that is low cost. So if you can get rid of high cost talent for low cost talent, that makes sense. And then the other side of this as well is that when you look at the sphere of teams that should be in on Hunter Greene, which pretty much is everybody, they're all going to be chomping at the bit if you say that he's available. That's why we've seen the reaction that we've seen around the country to this rumor. The one thing that gives me a lot of positive, there's 2 different things. One of them's not so big a deal because the Reds obviously have made it clear over the years that they will make a move regardless of what the fan base thinks. But at the same time, I think that if I were Craig Breslow or if I were any general manager that was talking to Nick Krall about this type of a deal, my first question would be, can he pitch more than 26 games in a season? Because he hasn't breached that number. So with all of that being said, the talent's undeniable. There is some questions about durability. And obviously for most teams, he is very cost effective at a guy who could be potentially your ace. That's where everything sort of logically makes sense. But then there's the other side of this where I don't know that the Reds would get what he should be worth. And then I also do not believe that anyone in Cincinnati would sign up for this sort of a trade, including myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Red Sox did kind of take that type of gamble with Garrett Crochet, who hadn't really pitched nearly as many innings as he did this past season for the Boston Red Sox earlier on in his career, because he had an injury history as well. But he was also somebody who, like you mentioned before, could undeniably be an ace for that team. And that's exactly what he gave the Red Sox in 2025. So Craig Breslow said, we're okay with taking that risk. They gave up quite a bit for him and it ended up working out. But if it hadn't worked out and he had spent more than half the season on the injured list, then what would that have looked like for the Red Sox at the end of the day with that trade, because of the prospects that they gave up for him? And the Red Sox are a team that has put themselves in position to be able to make these kinds of trades. They have a deep farm system. They have an overflow in certain positions right now at the major league level. So they are a team that could make that type of trade and pull the trigger. However, I would be a little bit hesitant with his ability to stay on the field, because they need pitchers who are going to be able to give them innings. That was something that we've seen be a problem really over the last couple seasons with this Red Sox team. But 2025 in particular, they had starters that were having trouble going deep into games. And I wouldn't want them to trade for him and feel like they have to place him on an innings restriction because of his injury history. So that would be a hesitancy I have. And that might hold back the Red Sox being able to make this type of trade, because they might not be willing to give up all kinds of big pieces for a guy that they know they would be taking a gamble on. So it would be an interesting scenario. I have no doubt that the Red Sox would be interested. This seems like a perfect pitcher who, if it works out, would be great for the Red Sox. He has really good stuff, and I really like a lot of what I've seen from him in terms of his arsenal and his ability to strike guys out, which is something that's big for the Red Sox. They look for big swing and miss guys. So this is somebody who would be right up the Red Sox alley. However, they could stop or press pause when the Reds start asking for certain players that the Red Sox don't feel like they would want to give up if there's concern about him being able to pitch a full season.
So I think because of the positioning of where the Reds are and where the Red Sox are as well in this whole equation, like, it's likely if Nick Kroll is on the phone with Craig Breslow and they're talking about this, it's likely that he's talking about, all right, firstly and foremostly, we need an outfielder who's either been in the major leagues or he's right there. And then we need a pitching prospect as well to replace this spot in the organization. Not necessarily somebody who's ready for the big leagues at the moment, but definitely somebody who's in the top that, that the scouts love, basically. So you're talking about two top players in this. And I'm sure that there might be more to the offer that Nick Kroll would present. And I think for that, it would make this trade a little bit restrictive, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to the Red Sox and where they are at right now, they would 100% be willing to move an outfielder. No doubt about it. They need to move an outfielder, in fact, if they do want to get pitching in return. However, the Red Sox are pretty adamant on their top pitching prospects because they don't have a lot of pitching depth in the farm system right now. They actually halted a Joe Ryan trade at the trade deadline because the Twins wanted their top pitching prospect and the Red Sox said no. He ultimately ended up getting called up to the Red Sox after that because they had injury after injury this year and so many young players were getting exposure to the majors this year. But they said no when he at the time was their top pitching prospect because they didn't want to give up a pitching prospect of that caliber since they just lack pitching depth in their system and they haven't in history been very good with developing their pitchers internally. So I know that's something they're trying to change and address more. So I could see that aspect of it being the piece that maybe holds this trade back a little bit, because I could see the Reds maybe asking for their top pitching prospects and the Red Sox say, no, we want to keep them around. And that's the part where I could see them having some disagreements.
So for that reason, I've got a better idea for a couple of different reasons. I think that when it comes to the Reds fan base, when it comes to the likelihood of a trade getting done, there's a different pitcher that I have in mind than Hunter Greene, but I still think that he's worth it. And I think that this makes it simple. And we'll talk about the outfielders that could be involved in this trade as well, coming up next.
We all make decisions every day, and I know it can be really stressful sometimes to make those decisions, but you can actually make fun decisions with Prize Picks. Why? Because it can get you paid for those decisions that you make. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. For example, I mean, Drake May's been going off for my Patriots lately. You could pick him to score 2 rushing touchdowns in the game on Sunday, and that could help you win lots of money. All you have to do is just download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right.
Thank you for making Locked On Reds and Locked On Red Sox part of your everyday routine and making us your first listen. If you haven't already made us a part of your everyday routine, make sure you hit subscribe right here on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, because we are free and available on all platforms. All right, Gabby, I teased this. I think that what the Reds should do, and I think that it's most likely what's to happen, because the Reds have a glut of pitching. They have a need of hitting, so you trade from your glut to get what you need. Trade from strength to fix your weakness. I think they trade Brady Singer at some point this offseason, and I think that Brady Singer, while his performance is not near as sexy as Hunter Greene, it is very, very reliable. Dude's pitched a ton over the last couple of years, and he has remained durable through it all. He's the first Reds pitcher since 2022 to eclipse the 30 start threshold. And I wouldn't expect that to be any different next year. The caveat with that is that his reasoning for being a trade chip is the same as Hunter Greene's, even more so, because after arbitration is over, he is projected to be the highest paid Red on the roster. So I think that if Nick Krall plays that game where it's all right, trade money right now for talent, that could be here longer, then Brady Singer's got to be the guy. Plus, what we talked about with the fact of Hunter Greene should be like outfielder plus top pitching prospect. I think you take that top pitching prospect off the table. If it's Brady Singer, the Reds are just looking for an outfielder at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because Singer is somebody who I've had my eye on for a bit in terms of somebody who could be a fit in the Red Sox rotation, because again, you need somebody who's going to give you innings. And it sounds like he's somebody who should be able to give us innings. And from a consistency standpoint, I definitely see him as a guy who hopefully gives you a lot of positive outings, because the Red Sox did have a few starters in this rotation where you didn't really know what you were getting from them. One day they were giving you ace caliber stuff. The next day it was, they were giving up 3 home runs and only pitched 3 in a third. So we don't really want that either. We want a guy who's going to be that reliable starter behind Garrett Crochet. And it sounds like he gave you that reliability in 2025, which is important. And if he's not going to be as expensive, the Red Sox have, more outfield depth than they really need right now. They last year had some injuries, and then Roman Anthony was their top prospect, who was then called up due to an injury, but then everybody was healthy, and they were kind of doing this weird thing where they were rotating guys in as playing DH on some days and then playing in the outfield other days, because they didn't really know how to handle it, because they had all these outfielders. Then they didn't trade any of them at the trade deadline because Breslow wanted to keep everybody. So now we're here in the offseason. Roman Anthony is supposedly coming back to start the 2026 season. He's on track with his recovery right now to be back for spring training as far as everything goes. So they're going to have to figure out what to do with all those outfielders. And it makes more than enough sense to move somebody. And that somebody likely is going to be either Jarren, Duran, or Willy or Abreu. Cedar Rafaela, likely off the table. They've extended him. They've made it pretty clear that they want his defense in center field. Probably the best defensive center fielder in the sport. So I'm not seeing him be moved. Roman Anthony also goes without saying, franchise player, not moving him, either building the team around him. So the likelihood is that they look to trade Jarren, Duran, or Willy or Abreu. Now, Willy or Abreu is a Gold Glove finalist for the second year in a row. He actually won a Gold Glove in 2024. So defensively, you're getting a great defensive outfielder with him. Whereas Jarren Duran, his offensive numbers declined in 2025 from where they were in 2024. However, he's such a versatile player, and with the speed that he provides both on the bases and in the outfield, you can get a player who, at any time could have a breakout year offensively, like we saw from him in 2024. So there's definitely upside when it comes to Duran that could give you that skill that not every team has in their lineup. And the Red Sox really did value that speed that they had in their lineup because it really helps to manufacture runs, which is how they won a lot of games. So if, the Reds were to say, we want a player who can provide some of that speed and give us some upside in that regard, then I could see them liking a player like Jarren Duran. I mean, until Roman Anthony got called up, he was consistently the Red Sox leadoff hitter. So he's a guy who can fit in really well in that spot because if he gets on, he can turn singles into doubles pretty easily, or he can be a threat to steal right away, which can make a pitcher uneasy right away.
That would be massive because I like TJ Friedl. I do, but I kind of wonder a little bit if we've seen his ceiling. And so if the Reds could acquire somebody who could play center field better and maybe move TJ Friedl to left field, then you improve the outfield defense a lot, but you also improve the lineup as well because TJ Friedl can kind of move around, and then you would put Jarren Duran in the leadoff spot. Let me ask you this. Who's got more team control between the two of them? Because I did not look that up before we started.
Yeah. So they both have a few more years of team control, actually, as of right now. So either way, if you're trading for one of them, you would kind of get that from either. So the situation with Jarren Duran, I would say that is the biggest concern, is kind of off the field because he's definitely had situations in which he's emotionally been in a tough place and it's really affected his baseball. And he's come out and said it. He hasn't been shy about saying it. So that would be something that would be important to kind of keep in mind is can he put the off the field stuff aside because he hasn't always been the best at that. And he was in his head for a lot of the 2025 season, which could have been part of why his offense took a decline this season. And I know he was coming with a lot of pressure on his back because, I mean, he was an MVP candidate in 2024. He was being talked about in a lot of those types of conversations because of the 2024 season he had. So that could have been part of why 2025 was a little bit harder for him because he had that all in the back of his head. But he's somebody who could easily slot in and fill a lot of roles, whereas Willy or Abreu definitely was one of the most consistent hitters on the team, and he no doubt has the defense. So if the Reds value something like that, if they value having a solidified defender to play right field every day, Willier is going to give you that. And he's also going to bring the bat. He did face a couple injuries this year that I will say is another thing to monitor just because he has had an injury history. So that's something that I would definitely be a little hesitant on. They haven't really been long injuries. He's never missed a whole season due to injury, but he did twice this season miss a couple months due to injury. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as well with him. But either way, you'd be getting a talented player back in return. It just is a matter of what the Reds value. And I talked about this a little bit on my show the other day is what aspect of that outfielder's game do they value the most? Because that ultimately would determine which one to me they would be more interested in. But the Red Sox definitely need to move one of them regardless because they need to fill other areas of need, pitching in particular, and they just don't have the space to play all these guys every day. It's just not feasible, and they would kind of be wasting an opportunity if they keep them all on the roster for them to not have room for everybody to play every day.
I think that has me with a prediction. As far as like something that would affect opening day, I think that there might be some guys that are not necessarily wearing the same uniform right now as they will be on opening day in that matchup, and at least for the opening series. So we'll get to that in just a minute, plus a comp that I think both of us can appreciate when it comes to Brady Singer. You got to check out this offer over on FanDuel right now. If you're a new user, you can place a $5 wager, and if it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. There ain't no odds like that on anything that would actually happen. I mean, you could probably find odds on that on something crazy like I don't know, the Dodgers to stop scoring runs, period. But when I do look at the World Series odds right now, the Dodgers are favored. They're minus 165. Then you have the two American League teams right after that. And you got the Brewers way down at plus 1,700. When you're looking at these World Series odds, Gabby, who you pick?
Yeah, everybody's going to hate this answer, but I have to go with the Dodgers. I just don't see anybody else having the same depth as they do in the World Series. They just have guys. They have guys who perform in the postseason, and they just have the roster to win in October. And it's unfortunate because I'm really hoping that the Brewers can make a comeback in the National League Championship Series and knock them out. But realistically, I think the Dodgers just have the best built roster to win the World Series.
I agree. And I'm also picking them hoping that it's some kind of reverse psychology because I've picked against them the entire playoffs and it hasn't worked out yet. So picking the Dodgers now, maybe that'll backfire on me at least. And if you want to pick against us or you want to pick with us, head on over to FanDuel right now. Download that app. Like I said, new users place a $5 wager, and if it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. Download FanDuel today. You can always continue the conversation with us after the show is over. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, and you can follow Gabby, and I forget what your handle is.
It's just at Gabby Maljanian. So that's pretty simple.
You didn't have to add any letters in there. I had to add in my middle initial. That's why I'm Jeff Carr with 3 Fs instead of 2 Fs, because nobody spells Jeff with 3 Fs. It's just
I keep things simple and sweet, Jeff.
Makes it easy. But yeah, so all right. We'll do some fun opening day predictions, but I want to start with this because I think that one of those two guys you mentioned will be wearing a Reds uniform. I think it's going to be Willy Abreu because I just think that Jarren Duran might cost more than Willy Abreu is, and I could be a little bit wrong on that based on the consistency, but that's what the Reds need. The Reds need a consistent bat with a good glove that they can stick into a corner outfield spot. They're pretty married to the idea of Noelvi Marte in right field, so it might be that they acquire Willy Abreu and put him in left. But at the same time, I feel like Jarren Duran and his center field ability might cost more than Brady Singer. And I know that Nick Krall has been very gun shy about aggressive trades. So if the trade makes sense and it's Brady Singer for Willy Abreu and maybe not much more than that, if not just that 1-for-1, then I think he's likely to do that. And the reasoning that I think that both fan bases can get behind Brady Singer is that there's a lot of his game, except for the leg kick, that reminds me of Bronson Arroyo. A lot of how he pitches limits the walks. He kind of can be susceptible to the long ball a little bit, but as long as he limits that in a given day, he can be pitching really good and really deep into the ball game and give you a lot of value out of the starting rotation.
Yeah, I feel like the flexibility that Jarren Duran gives of being able to play both in left field and center field could be something that's intriguing to them. Whereas Willy primarily has played in right. So there might be some hesitancy there. But I do think both teams could benefit from this because it kind of fills a huge need for the Red Sox in the starting rotation with a steady pitcher because they have young pitchers who have gotten exposure now to the majors, but there are still question marks with them, not really knowing how they're going to pan out because they're still kind of feeling things out in the majors. These kids have only made a handful of starts, so we don't really know what they're actually going to be. So, and I've advised this to the Red Sox front office on my show multiple times, do not go into the season with question marks and just assuming that somebody's going to pan out. That's just not a way to build a World Series team. And now that they were a playoff team, as far as I'm concerned, they need to be looking to build a World Series, no doubt, contender in 2026. So that's what you do. You go and you get something solidified, and it sounds like Singer would at least give them something solidified. And they have Brian Bayo, who's solidified to also help round out that 1, 2, 3 in the rotation. And then whatever happens with the 4 and 5 starters, they can kind of experiment with some of their younger players to see who they feel confident in and who they don't. But that's the missing piece right there, is truly that other high leverage starting pitcher that can be thrown into the rotation behind Garrett Crochet. And every 5 days is likely going to give you a good outing. That's exactly what we need.
And that's what Brady Singer provided. I wouldn't say that he was like one of the two best, but he was absolutely really, really good. And I think that, at least based on WAR, there's a little bit of undervaluing that we as Reds fans had done. I mean, he's right there behind Elly De La Cruz. He had 3.1 wins above replacement. He's scored in Baseball Reference this past year. And his longevity is really what the Reds had missed for a long period of time. But you mentioned front offices and their whole idea of like, all right, you know what? I think we're good. And when they're really not good. And that's kind of where I'm like, I know Willy Abreu hasn't played left field, but the Reds would absolutely do that because they acquired Gavin Lux last year and said, you're going to play left field and do play the infield. So I'll take a right fielder moving to left field over moving an infielder to the outfield. They've been doing that way too much, Gabby. And I'm really tired of seeing that. I want to see them get outfielders to play in the outfield. I know it's a novel concept.
I know. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy to think about? You want an outfielder to play in the outfield?
Right. Get the right guy for the right job. But yeah, no, I'm
in the infield. So
yeah. Well, Mookie's a different animal. All in. I mean, he might win the Gold Glove. I think it's between him and Nick Allen. I think he still might beat out Nick Allen. But man, he was really good at shortstop this year.
I know. Yeah,
but
it's the Red Sox have had this mindset over the last few years of we're going to bank on our young players developing, which I'm all for, allowing your young players to develop. But now it's about surrounding those young players with proven guys because the Red Sox have a really nice young core. No doubt about it. Young players who now have exposure to the playoffs. I mean, they had 17 players on the active roster that didn't have an ounce of postseason experience going into the playoffs. And that experience that they got going into a place like Yankee Stadium in the playoffs is great experience for them. Now it's about getting more proven talent to surround those players with to help give them that extra boost going into a postseason run, because this is a team that now fans are going to be expecting more because they made the playoffs. Now it's okay, World Series time. So Craig Breslow, I will give him credit because he's not afraid to make aggressive trades. We saw it with Garrett Crochet. He gave up key prospects to get him, and it was so worth it. So in the off season, I wouldn't be surprised if that mindset is the same of I can be a little bit aggressive. I could give somebody up even if the fans don't like it. I mean, even going and trading Rafael Devers, knowing that people would be angry, he said, I'm going to do it anyway because I think it helps the long-term situation for this Red Sox team, and they'd be better off in the future if he's not here. So he shows that he can go and make bold trades and that he's not afraid to do that, even if fans aren't happy about it. So I think that's where there could be a little bit of a disconnect because it seems like he's willing to be maybe more aggressive when it comes to those trades.
That is true. Like everybody immediately said the best trade of the trade deadline happened well before the trade deadline because the Giants got Rafael Devers. Well, the team that got rid of him made the playoffs. The team that got him did not. Yep. So not sure how that one worked out. But that is interesting because the Reds are on the cusp of needing to do that needing to make decisions similar to that with a couple of different players on the run. So that might be worth thinking about. I might have to, maybe that's a half of a tease for folks next week. Anyway, I'll say this one quick, random, super bold prediction, and a lot of this time might change all of this, but I'm going to say it right now and people write it down and absolutely count me out if I'm completely wrong about this. Sal Stewart's going to hit a home run on opening day, and I'm not sure what his position is going to be. That's a hot button topic this offseason for the Reds, but he came up in September and really provided a spark for this lineup last season, and I think that he is going to continue to do that. He's got some pop. He's got a lot of confidence, got a lot of personality, so he's going to be easy to root for as a Reds fan, but I think that he's going to go yard on opening day. I'm calling it right now. I don't know if he's the first one, but he's going to be one of them.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm already counting down the days. It's always so sad when it's the off season, but I'm looking for a player who I think is going to have a big season in 2026 that showed a ton of more potential in 2025 than what we saw from him in 2024. I think he's only going to continue to elevate offensively. I mentioned him earlier, and that's Cedar Rafaela. I think he's going to have a big day at the plate on opening day because he's going to be determined to go into 2026 and show people that he deserves to be here. And he, a lot of fans talked badly about him over the course of the 2025 season, especially because of his bat. Showed a lot of improvement in that area. I think he's going to be out for vengeance in 2026. I think he's going to be the player that we're talking about on opening day when it comes to the Red Sox after that game is over. It's not going to be Garrett Crochet. I think it's going to be him.
Made me sad whenever you said he's probably not available because I give up a lot for Rafaela, but it makes sense why he's not available because obviously if you want to give up a lot for him, that probably means the team that has him doesn't want to give him up at all. So
yeah, wouldn't have extended him if they really were adamant on trading him this early in that contract. He's just too good defensively in center field, and that's just too valuable. And I know the Red Sox see that as valuable, so I don't see them even entertaining the idea of him being the outfielder that they do trade. But the Red Sox definitely had a really solid outfield. And I do truly believe that if they do trade one of those outfielders to the Reds, that you'll be happy with the product of whoever it is, because the Red Sox outfield was definitely arguably their biggest positional strength of this team in 2025.
And it might be the single biggest weakness on this Reds roster. So I'd be all in for it. That's going to do it for us here on this Locked On MLB crossover. Thank you so much for checking this out. And afterwards, make sure that you subscribe and you follow both Locked On Reds and Locked On Red Sox all throughout the offseason. We're going to be getting you ready for opening day, long ways away. I'm sure we're going to have one or two more crossovers between now and then as we get ready for the first series of 2026. It's not that far away. I mean, as far as time goes, nothing's far away anymore. It feels like I blink and I'm like, yeah, the other day this happened. No, that was like 3 months ago. Oh, okay. Anyway, we'll be at opening day before you know it. So make sure you're subscribed and make sure you check out Locked On MLB as you got Sully covering the league at large and all of his great takes and his trademark humor. And you've also got Locked On MLB Game Night. They're covering every game, every night, all through the World Series. That's all on the Locked On MLB feed on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, because we're all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.